Welcome back to the show, everyone.
We
I don't
must
know.
have had the memo about what we're going to wear. Black and white.
Just about to say I was literally about to say that. Mine is like a very navy, dark blue. Are you wearing black, Dana?
It is black, I think, but the polka dots are navy blue.
Yeah. Really you and I are on the same psychic wavelength as
and
usual.
I've seen sweaters like that with the buttons, and I thought they might be sensorily an issue. Do they bug you? Can you tell they're there?
No, I can't. But I also don't probably have that sensitivity as much as some. But I will say the bottom of the button, I don't know if you can see it, is rounded.
Oh,
it's smooth and rounded.
Nice.
So it's very nice. That. So someone really thought about why that may be uncomfortable for some. But
here's a good segue. See, you have somebody that was making a sweater, or as we say in our house, a sweater. We have to say sweater. So someone was making a sweater, and they thought about how it might affect somebody else, and they made the button smooth. And we're going to talk today about difficult conversations, or like being aware of what other mindsets are. Other people outside of your own brain might have a different way of seeing things.
Would it surprise you to know that I bought this sweater not in this country?
Wouldn't surprise me. Did you get it in Japan? Is it from Japan?
No,
because it strikes me as they would do something
actually
awesome like that.
In France.
Oh,
Oui, oui.
Oui. Cheveux. I'm trying to remember. I think cheveux is the name for a sweater. Cheveux.
Might be cheveux.
Okay.
Yeah.
Took a lot of French.
Not that I meant to flex. I was so lucky to be able to go on a trip to France, and they just had, their the way that they make clothing is quite different, actually. And it's so funny that we're talking about thoughtfulness.
Yes.
And stuff. So that's really interesting. I mean, I'm going to be honest with everyone. Dana and I needed about 30 good minutes of debriefing and just, exhaling and inhaling before pressing the record button. And I think it's because for Dana and I'll speak for you, Dana, just correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
We started this channel because we wanted to have conversations. Well, one, I mean, obviously we care so much about neurodiversity and neurodiversity awareness, not only just awareness, but real acceptance and embrace. And for us, it's these short little bits and short little snippets of just dropping seeds of information so that people can nurture them. Or, something that I see is that because people's beliefs are so hard to change. And, for our listeners that aren't in the United States, who didn't just go through this last round of elections, this 2024 elections, it's clear that when people have their beliefs challenged in any way, shape, or form, what they do is they dig their heels in.
Yeah.
So I think, as I think about the purpose and the spirit of this podcast, it has always been how might we have difficult conversations? How might we model that? And how do we put seeds of information out there, not to necessarily change people's mind, but for people just to have a different, like a little pivot or an opening or something where, what do we know? Just down the road with the right conditions, that seed can blossom and take, right? But it's been very, I will say, Dana and I behind the scenes, we do a lot of our own unfiltered processing.
Before we hit record, or in the case of today, we hit record and then we forget to not hit record and we capture it all. But there's a thing where I teach I went to a few times and then it was just like so hard, but it's called Difficult Conversations. And I think there's a reason I went a few times and then didn't go back, because it's so hard to create space for folks when you're challenging something that you feel really strongly about, or that you're, we learn about this in grad school, right? In psychology, where you have cognitive schemas about things that are, if you imagine like a bunch of baskets, and inside those baskets are smaller baskets, and inside those baskets are smaller baskets. So if it's one of your really big baskets that holds a lot of other ideas, those are going to be more resistant to changing. It kind of makes sense. If that's like your organizing schema and you dump that out, you have little baskets everywhere. Versus if it's just this little one, you take it out and it's like, okay. So like someone telling you, pineapple on pizza is good. And someone says, you're crazy that. And then they say, just try it. And you're like, oh my God, it actually is pretty good. Right? That's a little basket, probably. Unless you like own a pizza restaurant, then it might be a big basket. But when you're talking about like an election, deep held beliefs about things, those are tough. And maybe the older you are, the longer you've held those beliefs, the more resistant they are to change. I.e., my father, who's always voted Republican, and despite the fact that he has a gay disabled daughter, voted Republican and doesn't understand why I'm upset. Those are very deep baskets. So part of me is really angry at him, but part of me, the psychologist in me, is like, yeah, well, there it is again, right? There's this idea of groupthink that we know about that was sort of a seminal thing in our field, where we as humans tend to organize and gravitate towards things that make sense to structures we already have in place. This is how social media learns what you like and continues to feed you things that you might like, right? To keep you there. Problem is it could have you then not see anything outside of it. And so it oftentimes takes a really big thing to sort of shake that. And then even then, there can be a whole group of people who don't see it. Take, for example, several years ago when Black Lives Matter has been around for a long time, but the George Floyd murder shook a big basket for a lot of folks. I know it did for me, and I was pretty socially interested already, but I was like, it made me feel something that I hadn't before, and something shook loose, and I'm like, oh my God, there it is. It wasn't all in my brain anymore. It was like in my gut, and I'm like, oh, that's what people have been saying. Now I get it. And then once that big basket's poured out, you don't repack it. Now you see things differently every time you look around, right? And something like an election, I think why people are so obviously half the population, and maybe slightly over half the population, is very happy. And then the other half isn't. I think what's been so difficult about this one is, for me personally, it's been about like sexism, right? That we can again elect someone that was not apologetic about sexism, misogyny, convicted of raping somebody. I don't understand how this is happening. Would choose all those things over a woman. And to me, it's sort of, as a woman, as a member of a lot of minority classes, or having a lot of target ranks, it feels like now we've done this twice. We've had a woman, very accomplished, capable woman, twice be defeated by the same person who has a lot of shortcomings in my mind, knowing that other people feel differently, right? And why we feel so wounded about it, right? The sense of justice, right? And a woman of color running. So you have people that are non-white thinking, great, this is going to be great. And America clearly said, no way. So there is this sort of colonized white male patriarchy that just feels crushing. And then when you experience something on that level, it does feel personal. It feels more crushing. Rights being taken away, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of fear for that time. My wife and I are now worried about losing same-sex federal rights because this administration has talked about backing those out. So what does that mean? That there's everything from like what could happen in my own life to what could happen in my community, what could happen in my area, what could happen otherwise, what could happen to people I know, et cetera, et cetera. Those conversations are very hard to have. And people tend to, like you said, dig their heels in, or it's hard to shake a big basket, right? And so it's easier to say, no, you don't know what you're talking about. It's X, Y, and Z. Especially if it's something that goes against those larger schemas that have been in place forever. right? Those are hard things to talk about. And it's hard to even facilitate those discussions like in a group. These difficult conversation meetings they have that I went to a few times, and it was just a crap show, right? It's like, oh God. There's a reason this country is so polarized now, because those conversations are so hard to have, right? And it isn't necessarily, people bang their head against the wall like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. I've done that. This person won't listen to reason. I'm telling him these reasons. It's just not how those things necessarily worked. If it could be dispelled through reason, we'd all be on the same page, all of us. But we're not. I mean, some of it's that human nature where, no, I'm going to resist what you have to say because I have this mindset that's nice and ironclad, and I don't have to be uncomfortable. I mean, I have things like that too. It's not just about the election. We all do. I'm not trying to call out a bunch of people that are thinking one way or the other, but as psychologists, we can look at this and be like, oh my God. And my wife will ask me all the time, how is this happening? You're the psychologist. And I'm like, it's actually understandably how it's happening, because this is what humans do, right?
Yeah.
If you don't know, look at seminal works that wouldn't fly today, like the Milgram prison, or the Milgram shock experiment, or the Zimbardo prison experiment. Humans need to feel secure in their beliefs, and if they don't, it's very scary, right? Think about what psychotherapy is. We're just constantly challenging beliefs, and there's a reason why the container of it needs to be safe. There's a reason why information doesn't flow both ways, and we don't run out and tell the community, oh, this person just told me this stuff. There's a reason it's confidential. You have to have that to feel safe enough to even peel any of those layers off, versus even having a conversation with someone who has very different ideas than you. This is the proverbial, I try to talk to my relatives at the holiday dinner, and we ended up fighting. It never goes well. And why is that? Because these conversations are very hard to have.
Yeah. As you're talking, Dana, a summation, right, is that we've let our ideas become our identity.
Yeah.
And, Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote The Tipping Point, just came out with another book, which is kind of challenging his original Tipping Point book, which cool. I think is so super cool.
Yeah.
And it's like
that he's willing to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, things I got wrong, in the Tipping Point, right? And he said something in an interview with Trevor Noah. So, first of all, these are two people I love to listen to in general. So I'll just, put out my bias to begin with.
Yeah. I know. I've read all three of Malcolm Gladwell's books. They're all good. Yeah.
Amazing, right? And what Malcolm Gladwell says is your ideas and your morals should be different. You should be able to change your ideas all the time, because information's changing, you're changing, all of that's changing. But your beliefs, your morals, like those values, those are not necessarily changeable. But when you get information otherwise, how do you manage that information? But I love that idea of separating. So often in psychology, we want to integrate. When sometimes we need to separate. We need to separate this piece, and that ideas are not us per se, and that those should be able to change. And I think that the reason why having difficult conversations is not happening is because it's unsafe. I mean, like, it's psychologically unsafe, that's for sure, because you are hitting the nerve, if you will, right, at the identity level. But for some, it's become physically unsafe to have difficult conversations, right? So we don't know how to do that. And so, my hope is that we don't just complain about it. I mean, Dana and I, this podcast has always been a real passion project for Dana and I. I think that's demonstrated after our, 120 episode, consistent episode or whatever. And that's because we want, and yeah, I get it. Like, we've been accused of being in our own echo chamber. And it's true. Dana and I have a lot of similar belief systems and value systems. We are very aligned in those. And so, yes, it might sound like we are both, pro-right for lots of different people. So I think, like, how do we do this though? Like, how do we encourage people to have ideas? And the other thing, and I don't mean to blame social media, but I'm going to go there.
Okay.
Talk
Well, it
about
has
echo chamber.
some
Oh,
onus for sure. Yeah.
yeah, we talk about echo chamber, right? And we all know that the
Mm-hmm.
algorithm is going to feed you what you've been watching. And so you don't
Yeah.
ever get an
Not the whole
opposing
story.
idea, right?
Yeah.
You don't get the whole story. That's such a good way to put it, Dana. Like, what's the whole story?
Yeah.
But we also have lost all of these really great ways we used to connect. Whether, like, I think about sporting events, or I think about, concerts, or these things. I mean, those things are, are kind of happening. They didn't happen at all during COVID.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And I do think that we're coming out of, like, our economy is coming out of COVID, inflation, the whole world.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't an incumbent in the entire world that won a re-election.
Yeah.
And that has
During
a
that
lot to
time.
do with just stability. And so I think the other piece, as I'm thinking about our current state of affairs and looking at understanding what happened so that we can remain active and remain not disengaged from the process, because I think that's the worst thing that could happen. But it's that there are so many people with economic instability in their homes. So even though the inflation rates are very, very low, even though unemployment is low, your pocketbook at the gas station, at the grocery store is still, you're still hurting. And so that speaks, even if we go back to Maslow. I know not everyone loves Maslow, but
no, I mean that the morning after the election, my wife was angry and she says, people pick the price of eggs over, abortion rights. And I stopped for a second and I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. So,
it makes sense.
you and I talked beforehand, we both live with enough privilege right now that if we had to pay $7 for a dozen eggs, we could. Most people can't. And I was like, well, that makes sense. I mean, for the first time, I'm like, well, that makes sense. Okay.
Yes.
So trying to find that, and I've been there, right? I've been there where I had to live on Diet Coke and ramen through graduate
school. Me too.
School,
but Dana still had her Diet Coke, even in the darkest times. Even in the
we'd
darkest
always go to like Sam's Club and get them as cheap as possible, but it was always there. But yeah, that sense of, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs has had a lot of criticism, but if you're not eating, you're not doing anything else. If you can't make ends meet, you're not doing anything else. If you have to go somewhere for your work and drive your car and you can't afford the gas, nothing else matters, right? So doesn't it kind of make sense that became the dividing issue? Now, for me, I can get in the social justice piece of it and be like, oh, crap. But that was like a chink in my arm where I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But that's also with a psychologist mindset of what is in there? Why is this happening? Where it's hard to do that, right? It's very hard to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. The, at the end of the day, your stability allows you to do higher order thinking. Like, I mean, like, like to get critical thinking again. When you are so overwhelmed by stress about making ends meet and these, that is a real issue. For me, it was about, well, how does that issue get solved? What are the policies and the plan to address most of America? Most of America. What is that? And that was not, I mean, again, we can I think, what do they call this? Like Sunday quarterbacking? No. That is a wrong sports analogy.
Monday quarterback. Except we have Monday Night Football. Maybe it'd be like Tuesday quarterback.
Tuesday quarterback. Whatever it is. Like we're going to just autopsy the situation. But like that was not necessarily a message that I think was very clear to say, this is what's going to happen. And this is how economics works like this. This is another thing, like in my mind, where we have a big gap of information about the way economics work. And
Yeah.
so, anyway,
Well, but
go on
you
and
said
on,
something
but
a few minutes ago that I want to bring back because I think it's an important point when you're talking about Malcolm Gladwell, where he says that values are run deeper. One of the things that I learned in Adlerian, my Adlerian training, we asked about values. What were the family values? Because those do tend to pervade and people carry them with them for longer. And then what are your beliefs? So what is the values? And the values, I think that's what's been so hard for me with my aged father is it's like, well, you had some hand in raising me. How are our values so different? And then I realized how much more I actually got probably from my mom, who grew up super poor and not having anything. Not that my dad grew up in privilege at all, but he's in privilege now and has been in that echo chamber for long enough. That sense of what is happening in front of you versus your values. And I'm thinking of the value could be, well, I need to take care of my family, for people that are worried about the price of eggs and gas and that kind of stuff. That should come first, right? I don't know if it's going to happen with the choice they had, but it sort of makes sense. And for a neurodivergent brain, I need to find a place that makes sense, that I can figure it out. Like, how did this happen? It's the when I don't know, it's that constant spinning, because I can stay on my values if someone has different values than me and be like, why don't you get this? Because it's a value set versus a belief. And like the George Floyd murder shook not just my values, but it really got into a belief bias that I grew up in, that attribution bias and everything else. Sometimes it takes an event like that to shake that system, right? Large enough that it's like, oh, okay, this is a human being and this is horrible. And now I see this larger pattern. But those are conversations that people don't want to have just lightly. You're not going to get a relative or a friend or whoever to necessarily see it your way, especially if it goes up against their value system. Or maybe you can see it as something that's value-based rather than a belief. And then you can understand why it's so resistant to change. So you're not banging your head against the wall over and over and over, right? You can be like, okay, that person has that value set. I have a different one. We have to agree to disagree or whatever, or not talk about it, however you decide to figure that out, right? I wasn't at this baseball game with my sister. My wife was. And even though my sister and I, people used to mistake us for twins, what we looked like and sort of how we talked and what we believed and everything. But we've led very different lives over the past 30 years, really, in different ponds. And when they were doing the beginning part of the baseball game, they do thing wonderfully at our Mariner Park, warnings about strobe lights and things like that, right? They have those trigger warnings now. And apparently my sister said to my wife, oh, isn't it too bad they have to do all that now? And she told me that when she came out, my mouth just dropped. And I'm like, it's a good thing I wasn't there. But then I started to think about, how does this person not know about the reason for that and the sense of ableism with that came out of her mouth? And I'm like, well, there it is. So even two people that grew up so close our entire upbringing and into college, now spending so much time in different systems, that's a value that's different for us now. And it's predicated a lot on experience and what's important to us and, being aware of that. I said, well, what did you say? She said, I didn't say anything. So I just figured, it's not gonna get in at that point. And I was just like, oh my God. But it was that sense of awareness of, for a little bit of time, feeling like I needed to be the one to educate. And then I'm like, it's not my fight, right? It's not. And so that's about difficult conversations too, is when do you know to just stop, right? I think that's what's so hard about people that are struggling now with these big two camps in the United States right now, and they feel so polarized. When can you just say, we need to drop this and do whatever we're doing together, or along those lines? It's so hard.
I feel like America needs to go to couples counseling.
Good couples counseling. Has to be a competent couples counselor. Yeah.
Because good couples counseling looks like, and this is why I can't do it.
I'm
not good at it.
Yeah. I'm
I
really
would
good at it,
never.
but I hate every minute of it.
It's really hard, and here's why it's hard. Because
Yeah.
3 people are in the room. You have one
Mhm.
person, one partner, the other partner, and the relationship
And then them together. Yeah. Yeah.
And those 3, it's like, how do you make it work and try to live a life of fulfillment or whatever you want out of your marriage, right?
Yeah.
When you have different beliefs and different values, and that by no means do I think we're saying everyone needs to have the same value or
Oh, yeah.
beliefs.
No.
No way, because
Mm-mm.
that's really would be really
Yeah.
scary. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is about being able to hold your own belief system without getting what is the word I'm looking for? Without getting offended,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
bothered? Offended might be
Mm-hmm.
better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, how do I say, that is your piece and this is my piece? And
Mm-hmm.
how do we have a conversation, if willing,
Mm-hmm.
where we can both kind of understand each other's positions and
Yeah.
not have to make an agreement that we have to agree with each other?
Yeah, we're two different people, and if this isn't the primary motivator of our behavior, it's
Yeah.
okay. You can continue to talk about that and just have it be a thing.
No one wants to have these conversations, Dana. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I find these conversations to be fascinating
Mm-hmm.
because I love understanding
Yeah.
why people think what they think and how they got
Mm-hmm.
there. I
Mm-hmm.
love it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like the best story that I
Yeah.
am absolutely
Right.
fascinated in.
What's in here?
And
Why? Why? Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Right. And how often, we get what do we get accused of a lot of? Like, oh, it depends. Well,
Yeah.
should I do this? It depends.
It's
Oh, it depends, right? That's like, oh, screw you. Like, I'm not
yeah.
paying you to say it depends, right? Whatever.
Yep.
But I just had oh my gosh. These are the times when I question my own touch to neurodiversity, because where my mind went, Dana, is
Yeah.
the depends adult diapers.
Oh.
And then and then in my mind, I thought it would be funny if you and I marketed like the Depends
It
diapers, like, as part of
depends.
our
As a
merch.
yeah, see,
It
see,
depends.
yeah,
You and
yeah,
I in
yeah.
diapers,
Yep.
funny. That's
Yeah.
what went through my mind in that moment. And so I thought I'd just share that little cat. Nope.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, there
absolutely
it is.
not anywhere
Yeah.
touching.
'Cause it's a
Anyway,
difficult conversation to have,
it's a
that you might
difficult
have
conversation with
neurodivergent
myself.
traits at least.
Oh my gosh, I'm there. I've been all of my clients that listen to
Yeah,
this podcast. They in sessions they'll say, "Come on,
yeah,
I
yeah,
heard your episode. Come
yeah.
on."
But
Like,
the point being,
like,
like, if it's
yeah,
a big part of your to your point again about it being an
yeah,
identity is a very big basket. It's a very huge
yeah,
thing to change, and
yeah,
if it's a part of your identity,
yeah,
typically that knowing or that changing or the
yeah.
just integrating it's a lot harder to get in there for sure.
It's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah,
I sit with a lot of hope in the sense that it's a choice that we can make, is to be hopeful
hmm
and to do things that we believe that can make a difference. I think, Dana, as you were talking about the difference in a way of nature and nurture, you're talking about
hmm
your sister, and you like
yeah.
same,
What the hell
you come
happened
from
there?
the same genetic pool. You were, raised in the same family, and here you are. And our experiences shape who we are,
hmm
the culmination of our experiences, which is why, like, when we're coming to even autism diagnoses
Yeah,
in adults, we can't just rely on a DSM.
yeah,
We
yeah,
have to get into lived experiences, and the culmination of those tell
yeah.
us so much about a person. Um, and so for
Good
us,
point.
it's like really having neutral ground
Yeah,
of being able to talk about and not to convince each other of
yeah.
anything, but to have an understanding of where the other person's coming from.
Right,
That's
right.
it. That might
Yeah.
even be a really good start,
Yep. Yep, exactly.
you
And
know.
that could be hard for you too to be like, okay, I could see where you could see that. I don't see it that way, but I could
Yeah.
see how you see it that way. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, could we call that empathy?
Yeah. I think so. And just even,
that's
being able to walk in someone else's shoes so you can see their point of view. I guess that's
perspective
empathy.
taking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
perspective taking,
Exactly.
empathy, these types of,
That's right.
I don't know, crucial social skills, relationship skills that we should have.
That we
Anyway,
say we don't have, and we do. Yeah, we actually do have
right.
those.
And that, you know what, no matter what party you belong to in the United
Mhm.
States or wherever you stand politically,
Mhm.
um, empathy and perspective taking can be used everywhere.
Yeah.
And both parties were very guilty of
Yeah.
doing a lot of things that were so off-putting.
Yeah.
So for us, it's just like, how do we see through that and how do we move forward with being better and being
Yeah.
better examples of that? And, I'm not saying Dana and I have the answers, but we're going
Yeah.
to try.
Yeah. Try, yeah, because we have to, otherwise I'll lose my mind. I mean, I have to try to understand. I
Yeah.
can't just go on blind faith. It doesn't work for me as an autistic person. I need to know the whys.
Well, that's
Yep.
the open loop, Dana.
Mm-hmm.
That's the open
Yep.
loop. And so, and this is where I think a lot of emotional investment comes in, when you've
Mhm.
got to know, like, it's important for you to close that loop. It's important for you to understand why. It's
Yeah.
important for you to understand those details. For many, it's become their special interest.
Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah.
So when it's become your special interest and the results may not have been what you wanted, whichever side you're on, that was
Yeah.
devastating
Oh, yeah.
for
Oh,
many.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was another thing. So there's another layer. There's so many layers here. And I think
Yeah.
in so many ways, like neurodivergence can turn the volume up, the intensity
Oh,
level
yeah.
up
Yeah.
on things that are like kind of already in the zeitgeist, but like it can just like, okay.
Tweak it pretty
Yeah.
hard.
I'm not sure if this episode was more for you and I or everyone else. Well, thank you, Marvels,
Yeah.
for being our therapist today.
Yeah. Let us know if this is helpful at all or not. Yeah, because we want to understand. Yeah. But I
It's
think
our
it's important
post-election
to
debrief.
try to have a conversation, I think is the big thing here. So we're not avoiding it anymore. We're going to talk about it.
Oh, or find people that you can have conversations with.
Yeah, that's right.
And hopefully they're not your mirror image, hopefully they're
And
a
when
little bit
all
different
else
than you.
fails, exercise and spend time with your pet. We thank God we have a dog
clear.
now. Yeah.
That's clear. Except for yesterday when I came home and I forgot that I hadn't locked the garbage.
Oh, no. I bet Stanley had a field day. Huh?
Maybe one day our thumbnail will just be the absolute devastation he leaves behind. That will be just, I should have done that for net positive. I should have done that for pets net positive. Instead of our cute little emojis, memoji, whatever are those things, Bitmoji things are, it should have been my kitchen.
Yeah, your kitchen, and then adorable him on the other side. So you see you have to have one with the other. Yeah.
Okay. On that note, everyone, hang in there, everyone. I thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing Dana and I
to debrief
do
with
this.
You. No,
to debrief with you. Yeah. We hope that this episode finds you well. And just kind of remember, like, you're not alone, there are lots of people out there that are with you. But let's be hopeful. Let's stay attentive and let's act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. All right, everyone. We will catch you in the next episode. Be good to you. Bye.